I'm your host, Jessica Flynn of thejessicaflynn.com, and our show is on a mission to unleash local wisdom for widespread impact. We're committed to inspiring positive change and empowerment in our small community and beyond. Joining us today, we have someone with a remarkable history of empowering organizations, both large and small, to revolutionize how they ideate, innovate, and change. Peter LePiane is an accomplished management consultant for the past 25 years, has been serving both entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, guiding them to launch products and services that achieve their intended outcomes. Peter aims to impact the world and his community by reducing the uncertainty inherent in entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, thereby allowing new, innovative ideas to change the world. Outside of his professional life, Peter is a dedicated husband and father of two, and he fully embraces the Collingwood lifestyle, participating in activities such as skiing and snowboarding. We do that together on the weekends in the winter, hiking, beach going, and golfing as many days as possible in our small piece of paradise here in Collingwood. Without further ado, Peter, thank you for joining us today.
Well, Jess, it's an honor to be here. Thanks very much for having me on your show.
And we have gotten to know each other over the past several years, but I'm really excited to dive in and get to know on an even deeper level what exactly it is you do. You know, you have your friends and you're like, oh yeah, Peter's a management consultant. I kind of know what that is. But to allow this conversation, not only for us, but to kind of a peek behind the door for our viewers at home of what happens in these rooms and how does innovation actually come about. So in your intro, you've been doing this work for 25 years. How does one get into management consulting?
Well, I think there are a bunch of different paths. I can tell you how I got in.
That's the question.
Yeah,
how
that's
you
the question.
Yes.
How did I do it? I think pretty much by accident. So I have a computer science background, so I've been around tech pretty much my whole life, and really specifically creating products. So I'm not the type of person you may have noticed because you know me, who enjoys being behind a screen and not talking to humans.
Right.
So very much an extrovert on any kind of evaluative scale I've ever taken. So because I am an extrovert by trade, I found myself gravitating more towards talking to people about the solutions that they wanted in their technology. So that started very much in the corporate world and kind of designing very specific things for very specific purposes and eventually just transitioned more broadly into products, period. So that might be a new product that hasn't seen the world yet, perhaps an entrepreneur, some amazing local ones here. That are endeavoring to do just that, and all the way to companies, big ones, who are looking to launch the next big thing. So ever since startups, kind of around 2000, started to eat big companies' lunches, that started to happen a lot in bigger companies. So, how did I become a management consultant? It really through solving problems and product-related problems for people and having organizations call on me to do that.
And you have the computer science background, so you understand the technology, but you also understand the people component. And that's probably a unique combo for, I am married to a computer guy, and he's not the extrovert. He's kind of who you think of when you think of computer tech. So I think it's such a fun juxtaposition that you have that puts you in that position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I don't think I'm any kind of unicorn or anything like that. Like, you can find me out in the wild for sure.
Yeah.
But look, to be honest, I've done the people aspect of this way more in the last, call it 15 to 20 years than anything else. So if I were put in front of a computer screen to actually produce something, software, I would be entirely lost.
Right.
Your husband, on the other hand, very much not so. So it's just where my passion...
It takes a village to build a product, to raise a family, to do all the things, right?
Totally,
so you're part of that team.
Well, I think of my kids as products, really. No, I don't. I absolutely absolutely do not think of them as products.
So also in the intro describing who you work with, who you serve, your bio talks about entrepreneurs, which we're getting to speak more and more on the show, and also the term intrapreneur. So can you give us like a baseline definition of those two terms and where you see them out in the world?
Yeah, so an entrepreneur, and perhaps some folks aren't familiar with what that is, to me is simply someone who is off on their own. They might have some partners, they might have business partners, and they're looking to launch something into the world that, in their view, the world hasn't seen or the world needs in some way. An intrapreneur is really the exact same thing, but they are employed by a company. So they are in a company already. Oftentimes, those companies are quite large, and those folks will self-identify as intrapreneurs. So the exact same thing, bringing a product to the world, perhaps even bringing a feature in a product to the world that the world hasn't seen yet, but doing that within a large company.
So the mindset is the same, that creativity, that innovation, the building something. Entrepreneurs are maybe those startups, and then intrapreneurs are working for those larger companies that you're working with to support.
Yes, the mindset should be the same. It's very difficult. I mean, when you're on your own and you're doing this, it's very easy to have whatever mindset you choose. There's really nobody...
For better or for worse.
Exactly, right? You don't have to have a particular mindset to bring a product to life. You can have whatever mindset you like. Personally, there's one that I think works better than most other ones. But inside a large company, there's all sorts of different pressures. Political ones, things that have people striving for promotions, things that have people fearful that they might not get a promotion, a raise, their bonus. All these things can dampen what I believe is, or at least the ideal mindset state that an entrepreneur, just to put it in that context, should have. Or
even if they're in that organization, the innovation and the creativity they need to have might be stifled. So that's when you get called in to help bring that out.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So you're undergoing a bit of a rebrand as you grow, which is very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Idea Bridge Group, and I love your tagline. Of course, the word empowered means a lot to us, but your tagline is empowering the possible.
Yeah, that's right.
So what does that mean for you in Idea Bridge?
Yeah, I think I'd like to decompose that a little bit. So talking about the possible and talking about empowering, and I'll start with the possible. So for me, that really breaks into two things. So the first thing we already talked about a little bit, and that is products, bringing products to the world. So allowing entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs to bring those products to life. Whereas if perhaps they may not get my help, then perhaps they wouldn't do that. Perhaps they'd run out of money, run out of, let's say, initiative, run out of trust in what they're doing, all sorts of different things that are really, really dangerous. And you need to persevere through what is a very, very, very difficult process to bring something to life. The other piece of what's possible and what I end up addressing is change and people change management, mostly in larger organizations. So we talked about some of those mindset challenges and how it's very difficult to kind of wade through all of these things that are in the way of kind of getting to where you want to get to, not just as an entrepreneur, but perhaps as a manager of people who perhaps is moving from working in one particular way for their team to working in a different way. And that's a challenge, always a challenge, to get people to move to where you might want them to go. So empowering that possible and the product possible is what I'm about. The empowering part is really quite simply just a notion of kind of teaching people how to fish. So as opposed to having them primarily just give that task for me to do, or to just teach them and go away, what I like to do is sit with them and really kind of show them what fishing looks like, and show them what good fishing looks like, and then hand them the rod and get them to try it, because you've got to dive into the deep end sooner or later, and that's probably the best way to do it, but with my guidance, so that nothing dangerous is going to happen.
And the larger the organization, the more diverse types of learners you're going to encounter. So that more coaching model enables you to ensure that those lessons are being learned.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really mentorship. So being there to handhold, I suppose, is as good a word as I can come up with, as they fall, because they're going to fail the first couple of times they do it. And letting them do it, this is almost like parenting,
right.
Letting them do it, and then talking about after the fact, what was that like for you, and what do you see any other path that you could have traveled to kind of get to the same place. And just from my own experience, you mentioned 25 years, hence the gray hairs all over the place. So it's been a while, I've seen a lot, and therefore...
And tech has changed a lot too in that period of time.
Yeah, enormously, and continues to do so, and will never, ever, ever stop. So
right.
That's just a fact of life. So yeah, I think the notion of kind of riding along with them in the journey is one that's really, really important to me, so that then I can leave and they can do it on their own very, very successfly. And we try to get to that point as quickly as possible.
And with the change management, doing it on their own, not just for a specific HR concept or something that they're tackling, but to take those practices and maybe use them. Like, they now have an arsenal of exercises or different ways of thinking to tackle future problems.
Yeah, I tend to leave most clients with a playbook. So they've got a set of plays, almost like setting up for a football game.
Right.
So they
a baseball game. I noticed your cufflinks
yes,
in the Jays.
That's true.
There, yeah.
Very, very large. Let's go Blue Jays. Very large Blue Jays fan. So yes, sure. And and the sports analogies will just keep coming.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll warn you now. Although that one was all you. Yeah, it's to me, it's about understanding the situation you're in and having something where you can say, I understand, I could pick this, or this as a tactic, which one fits best, and having enough guidance to see which one might fit best. It's always going to be an experiment at the end of the day. It's always going to be a learning process, but that's, I think the beauty of the process is I can't tell you how long it's going to take to get to the outcomes that you want. I can't even tell you if those are going to be the exact outcomes, but what I can tell you is, as we go, we'll learn our way to the outcomes that end up being the most important ones, and they'll reveal themselves.
So you can guarantee learning, and that I'm really excited to segue into that after the break, because you explain that process, or the value is learning as currency.
That's right.
And obviously, as a lifelong learner, I can't wait to tap into that further after the break. So be sure to join us. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll see you back shortly on Empowered with Jessica Flynn and Peter LePiane. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm your host, Jessica Flynn, and today we're sitting down with Peter LePiane, a management consultant who helps organizations revolutionize the way they innovate, ideate, and bring about change. Peter, you gave us a pretty great framework for how you do things. It's the teach to fish rather than giving a fish, essentially. But can you dive into some examples of the types of products or changes that you've helped these organizations make over the years?
Yeah, a somewhat recent interesting one was with a fragrance manufacturer over in Europe. So this is a company that puts fragrances into, you've probably used their products. They put fragrances into household things, candles, dishwasher
Lavender
detergent.
clouds or whatever.
Exactly, a hand sanitizer. So that was a big one for them during the pandemic.
Right.
So I was working with their North American division and with a sales force. So what they were bringing in a piece of AI. It wasn't called AI at the time. I think they called it machine learning, but by any other name, they're the same thing.
Right.
So the sales force at the time was incredibly resistant to this change. because they had done business this way for decades, some of them. And although some of the sales folks were newer, there was a resistance across the board because the piece of AI was replacing something that people in headquarters were doing. So their feeling, the sales force, was, well, we pay these people, I need support, I really don't care what you bring in, I'm not using it, I'm using them because they're expert at what they do.
Right.
And with that high level of resistance and quite literally people's livelihoods on the line, it was a challenge at first. So the approach was very much trying to understand individually, so I think there was 12, I want to say 10 to 12 different salespeople, trying to understand individually what motivated each person. And then not necessarily trying to find a lowest common denominator, but trying to strike enough of a balance so that the change was still acting the way that the corporate headquarters wanted it to act, which was very much an efficiency thing, generating new business. Those were major goals. But also having these people comfortable enough with the technology and comfortable enough with the new process so that they'd actually do it.
Right.
So it was very much what's in it for me, I guess, strategy at first, and then building in, because people can tell you anything. So they could, and they did at the end of the day, tell me what these things were. But what we had to do was build actual experiments, small ones, cheap ones, quick running ones, to test that that was true, that what they said they wanted was actually what they were going to do. And that's how we ended up iterating our way to much higher levels of adoption.
And do those smaller tests also act as a way of like nurturing those resistant individuals into the process? They can kind of see in small doses how this change might really actually be a positive?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. There were some that it was really, really difficult to get them on board. And to this day, I keep in touch with the client off and on. One of them, I don't know that one of them actually has adopted it, but they've left this person alone because they're very, very successful regardless.
Right. Yeah. So that's an example of the change.
Yeah.
Do you have a product example, something you've been a part of to help? It was an idea and you helped that team ideate, innovate, and release it.
So telecommunications company in Canada, and I was working with an innovation team, and that innovation team was serving a marketing group in their mobility division. So these were all around cell phone plan type things. So there was a particular product, I'm trying to generalize it enough so that I don't say exactly what it is. There was a particular product that had to do with plans and how families were using their plan. And although there had been things that had been tried in the past to do similar things, this was an innovative approach to kind of evaluating usage and perhaps using more, because that at the end of the day is how this telecommunications company makes money in their mobility division. So the approach that we used there, and this was a teach to fish thing. So I had people on the innovation team alongside me as we were testing very small tests out in the market, so with actual telecommunication company customers, mobility customers, and taking very, very small experiments that were based on a hunch, that were based on a hypothesis. We think that they, whoever the target audience is going to want to do this. So we would try and build, and this is where the trick is and the art form is, the way that I do this, and is something called lean startup. This is out there in the world. It's not like I invented it. So the idea is build something as cheap and as small as possible, just like a change experiment, without building the actual product, and test your way through those guesses, through those hunches, through those hypotheses, so that you gain enough insight so that you know the direction that you want to go in.
And you're empowering organizations to make more data-driven decisions when they're launching a product or making a change. When they have that to fall back on with their team, with their audience, with their clients.
I've seen lots of situations where what felt like, so let's take a bank example, what felt like an initiative that came down from on high, perhaps, negotiated on a very nice, expensive private golf course,
Right.
who knows? And when it got down to the team level to implement, there was just no motivation to do it because they all knew that there was no data to support
Right.
this. It was just, they said so, therefore we're doing it. And that's nobody who's building a product, whether it's an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, wants to put all that effort in for it to flop in the market.
So not only is it good business for the bottom line because you're going into the market with a lot more base, like foundation under you, but it's actually a really smart corporate or organizational culture tool because you're taking everyone on the journey with you, and they're really a part of that launch, the whole process, the pregnancy of the children, the birth. They're with it for longer.
Absolutely, and I mean, if you're co-creating anything, whether it be a change or a product, a child, I don't know, a movement, whatever it might be, a show, if you bring people in and allow them to create their own destiny within guardrails, of course, right? Like there's a vision for everything.
Give them the sandbox, and then
But there's a vision for everything, whether it's a product or a change, a show, whatever. There's a vision for everything. So it's unreasonable to say, hey, Jess, I'm bringing you along. You can co-create whatever you like. Well, no, here's where we're pointed.
Yeah.
So therefore, here are the guardrails. But after that, let's make this together.
Right. Fun. And what a
Yeah.
fun way to show up and work. So going back to this idea of learning as currency, and you mentioned AI, and that was maybe before AI got really trendy, machine learning, but there's going to be a lot of change very quickly. There already is in the workforce. I'm sure your phone is ringing off the hook, or will be very soon, with just organizations needing this support, this coaching of how do we adapt quickly, how do we not maybe like save jobs, yes, be lean. There's so much to think about. So talk to us about where you see the future of how organizations are going to survive, not only survive, but thrive through this learning.
Yeah, so we're so programmed, let's take public companies as an example. We're so programmed to look at earnings. Really, earnings is the bottom line at the end of the day. And there are lots of other financial ratios you could look at, but in essence, earnings is really the thing. But so what I started doing is thinking about and really decomposing, like, what does that mean? How does a company get to earnings? Well, earnings is really a reward for doing something in the market that nobody else is doing. Now, somebody else has got to want it, and there's got to be scale to that need, certainly out there in the marketplace. But how do we get to something that's different? Banks are a good example. There's a lot of copycat products out there, specifically in the Canadian banking market. And when I've worked with banks in the past, it's always been a source of frustration that there hasn't been that level of creativity to say, well, what's going to be different and what difference is going to matter? The only way, getting back to that learning as currency question that you have, the only way for me to get to that, to earnings, that bottom line of earnings, is to do something that no one else is doing so that you reap benefits, financial ones, out of that. Well, the only way to figure out what is different from what's out there already is to learn your way there. So instead of focusing so much on earnings, and if we believe that learning is the precursor to those earnings, then why don't we measure learning? And why don't we report on learning? I mean, this is a crazy idea maybe, and I'm not about to change how the SEC does business, and how we report for public market companies. But I think that would be a really good indication. If I could see that company A learns faster, better, and cheaper than company B, right there on, well, it wouldn't be an income statement, but a statement of some form, I'd probably invest in company A.
And going back to that company culture, I know there's a lot of turnover. Like it's a huge problem for organizations where employees are demanding more. They want to feel like they're a part of something. So not only does learning impact earnings, but like you said earlier, taking your people on the journey and having them feel invested in what you're building and what you're launching is a better culture building strategy, it sounds like, as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean,
when is more learning the wrong answer, right?
Yeah, never,
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And not only that, there's that notion of co-creation and feeling a part of, like, you had some small piece of creation, of decision making to make that thing, whether it's a change or whether it's a product out there in the world. You had some decision making as opposed to it just being imposed on you. Is a motivator. It is, I think, for everybody.
And it is very empowering. Empowering the possible.
It is empowering, isn't it?
What
now?
a great tagline,
Yeah.
and a great place to wrap our segment. It's gone by so quickly. We've learned so much. So for all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in to our conversation with Peter LePiane of Idea Bridge Group, Empowering the Possible. And we hope you join us next time on Rogers TV, as well as my YouTube channel, The Jessica Flynn. Until then, this is Empowered, and I'm your host, Jessica Flynn.